off the bat, let's address the searingly obvious. From a sales standpoint, the Xbox One is far from the abortion we all expected it to be, and that it outright deserves to be. The Xbox One is doing respectable business, a very strong second place, but let's be real here. Respectable is frankly an abject failure for this company given their meteoric ascent with the Xbox 360 and their continued dominance in software sales. In short, this was Microsoft's generation to lose. Look, fanboys' mileage, of course, may differ, but then, since when haven't Xbox and Sony cronies been more full of shit than the only porta-potty at Woodstock? The PS4 reveal in early 2013, it was an abysmal failure, an absolute joke of a conference, a joke that didn't land with nary a punchline in sight, which goes a long way to explaining why Dane Cook was such a fan. Between their refusal to actually show the fucking machine, their vague Sylvia Browne-esque promise of games at some point, and Square Enix's announcements of an announcement, that shit was more tragically hilarious than an 18 clown car pileup on the interstate. So bad, in fact, that there were early comparisons to Sony's miserable 2006 E3 showing. Following that symphony of irrelevance, Sony all but cast their front door widely ajar and practically begged the new Xbox to sashay through the doorway, claim a placemat at the dinner table, and commence with ramming their fucking wife. But Microsoft's arch nemesis was not Sony, and I would argue that it hasn't been for at least the past 4 years. Sony did not sell Microsoft's first-party development studios like BioWare and Bungie out from under him, steadily bleeding away the formerly impressive lineup of Microsoft-exclusive software. Microsoft rigged that noose all by their lonesome. Sony had nothing to do with franchises like Gears of War and Halo being milk drier than Ann Coulter's inner thigh, and Sony had nothing to do with the creation of the 900-pound corporate boat anchor this company's been mulishly schlepping the fuck around for the past 4 goddamn years. Death, thy name is Kinect. As feverish a PR nightmare as the Xbox One initially was, the vast majority of the console's more serious problems have long since been ameliorated. You no longer have the bullshit DRM. You no longer must be connected 24 hours a day to the internet. You have at least a couple decent exclusive titles, which is more than the average person can say for the PS4. There is literally no malady the Xbox One presently suffers from that wouldn't be readily inoculated by taking a fucking sledgehammer to the Kinect. Without the Kinect, the Xbox One is easily $100 less expensive, if not more. Without Kinect, the system isn't running games at 720p due to mandatory, RAM limitations associated with the Kinect. Without Kinect, the Xbox One isn't running games at 30 frames per second for the exact same reason. Without Kinect, paranoiac anonymous is legion shitbags brewing in their own bullshit on NeoGAF aren't hoodwinking themselves into believing the purchase of an Xbox One is equivalent to installing HAL 9000 in your fucking living room. Because spy camera. Yeah, sure, asshole. Way to slam that red pill. At last, you finally isolated the lone crucial item of intel the Illuminati have been attempting to secure since time immemorial. Whether or not you go with the elastic or button-fly waistband on your piss-encrusted underoos. What a field day BVD you're gonna have with that information. I mean, there'll be no stopping Bob Page from establishing his one world government now. Way to crack the code, you fucking asshole.
Why contain it?
And what for? What discernible benefit has Microsoft accrued from their dogged insistence on fanatically shoehorning this accessory in every conceivable facet of their business model with fists that are hammier than Johnny Depp's acting? I'll tell you exactly what. It's not because of what it does, or what it sells, or who it caters to, but because of who endorses it. Project Natal may have initially been a neat concept with a brilliant piece of technology attached to begin with, but I remain fully convinced that it wasn't until mainstream Hollywood fixtures, so-called legitimate entertainment moguls and institutions like Steven Spielberg and James Cameron became married to the concept of gaming without controllers, that Microsoft broke the sound barrier in an attempt to jam the Kinect up his ass, because video games, like comic books before them, have a profound self-esteem issue. And actually, I've always found the equivalency between comics and video games is actually fairly profound. Even with the video game industry having raked in more annual revenue than Hollywood for going on a full fucking decade, For some inexplicable, confounding reason, they continue to regard themselves as the entertainment equivalent of Warsaw Ghetto refugees, second-class citizens eternally branded with the fiduciary mark of Cain, even as their filmic rivals collapse into fits of bankruptcy all around them. To illustrate my point, I'd like to play a clip of an interview with famed comic artist and writer Frank Miller from Men Without Fear, a mini-documentary on the creation and influence of one of my favorite comic book superheroes of all time, Daredevil, in which I believe by discussing the self-deprecating mentality of comics and the perceived inadequacy of the medium compared to films, I believe he actually unwittingly cast some very harsh illumination on the exact affliction that spawned and galvanized Microsoft's insistence on aggressively embracing the Xbox Kinect at the expense of all else.
Comic books have got a very strange self-esteem issue. In comics, in comic books and superhero comics, people have wasted an awful lot of creative energy and hard work looking for kids who aren't there. The audience who read Daredevil was not juvenile. They weren't. What's done by the hand in comics is something that movies cannot approach. We've felt so long like we were the retarded little bastard nephew of media that we've forgotten that we're better at certain things than they are. And then, yeah, movies are much better at a bunch of things. Movies are much more powerful. Movies control pace. A cartoonist has to be really smart to slow you down. A filmmaker just has to leave the camera where it is for a long time. And it's a different set of virtues and weaknesses. So yeah, I came in wanting to make comics more cinematic. I stay in wanting to make them less so.
Now, if you go through that interview and you replace kids with casual audience and comics with video games, I believe you arrive at the very embodiment of why the Kinect continues to drag Microsoft Electronics ever nearer to the crackling pyre of commercial oblivion. For all their turgid pronouncements of the industry's bounteous virtues at every year's E3, is there even one of you who honestly believes for even a moment that if an established filmmaker or acting institution like Harrison Ford or Michael Bay so much as batted their eyelashes in Microsoft or Sony's general direction, that they wouldn't immediately set aside no less than a full 45 minutes of that year's PAX presentation solely for their latest filmic flop and some ham-fisted video game tie-in? Giving up the ghost and making a decent game machine, something I have to applaud Sony for doing a fantastic job of with the launch of the PS4, to Microsoft would be an implicit admission that video games are no longer mainstream, something that should have been readily evident by way of the very exigencies of modern commerce and the dive-bombing 60% drop in software sales we quietly witnessed this past holiday season. Thanks, mainstream gaming media. Because while Sony dons their BO-infused wizard cape and goes LARPing with the rest of us leering dorks, Microsoft Game Studios would rather be bankrupt than make that long walk across the cafeteria away from the cool kids table to trade magic cards with the rest of us mouth breathers in the fucking nerd corner. And that is precisely the reason why, until the inevitable moment that Kinect is carved off the mole-bespectacled buttocks of this machine, they do not deserve your business. I'm Razor Fist. God fucking speed.